Hi, I'm Jim Riley. Did you know that hazardous materials are all around us every day? For instance, the gasoline that runs your car is a hazmat. So are the cleaning products you use to scrub the kitchen floor. Even the paint on your house, if it is oil-based, is hazardous. But if these things are so dangerous, why don't they injure more people? The answer is simple. It's because most of the time these materials are used correctly. For example, you know to turn your car engine off and not to smoke while pumping gas. You also remove food from the kitchen countertop before painting the ceiling above it. But even when we take precautions, accidents can happen. If a hazardous material is spilled in the wrong place, it could do serious damage. And if this happened at work, where these materials exist in greater quantities, the result could be a disaster.
Think of a welder's torch igniting gasoline fumes, or a 55-gallon drum of paint leaking into your facility's drainage system.
Sometimes a hazmat spill can seem like little more than a harmless puddle, but you shouldn't be deceived. If you don't know the right way to clean it up and get it cleaned up quickly, you could endanger your entire facility and put the lives of your coworkers in jeopardy. By learning how to clean up spills now, you can be ready should one occur.
There are several ways to learn about spill cleanup procedures. Start with your company's hazard communication program. It will teach you how to recognize the hazmats in your workplace.
Hazard communications classes will show you how to read chemical identification labels. They will also cover material safety data sheets, MSDSs. These documents briefly describe the major characteristics of a substance, plus recommended handling, storage, and emergency response practices to follow when dealing with it.
You should also read your facility's emergency response plan. This contains the rules for recognizing, reporting, and handling emergencies where you work. The plan details the roles of emergency response personnel and the lines of authority to be followed during a hazmat incident. It also covers communications, personal protective equipment, PPE, evacuation guidelines, and decontamination procedures.
The emergency response plan is meant to be read by everyone who works at your facility. Ask your supervisor where you can find a copy. Of course, the moment that you encounter a hazmat spill, you move from book learning to the real thing. When this happens, what you do next could mean the difference between just another day on the job and a tragedy.
Your responsibilities during a hazardous materials incident are determined by where you fit within a worker classification system devised by OSHA. Under this system, OSHA categorizes employees who deal with hazmat incidents into 5 levels. Your level is based upon 2 things: the type of OSHA-approved emergency response training that you have received, and the amount of time you have spent being instructed, as measured by a minimum number of class hours.
Next, we'll look at what makes hazmat training OSHA-approved and what tasks workers at each level are expected to perform during a hazmat incident.
As defined by OSHA, the 5 levels of hazmat training are First Responder Awareness, First Responder Operations, Hazardous Materials Technician, Hazardous Materials Specialist, and Incident Commander. These levels are arranged in order of increasing responsibility. For example, if you are classified as an awareness level first responder, your primary duties are to recognize hazmat emergencies and report them. On the other hand, an incident commander is accountable for all of the actions taken to clean up a spill, as well as the safety of every person in the area.
Before we go on, you should be aware that these training levels are not the same thing as job positions. Two workers may have different job titles and duties, yet still be responsible for performing the same tasks during a hazmat incident.
First responder awareness level training is for any worker who might witness a hazmat spill. This could include everyone who works at your facility, even employees who don't usually deal with chemicals, such as secretaries and administrative assistants. OSHA-approved awareness training takes a minimum of 4 hours. In this course, you learn basic facts about hazardous substances in your workplace. You are also taught how to recognize hazardous materials emergencies and who to notify if one occurs. Once you have completed this course, you will be an awareness level first responder. Because awareness level first responders are often the first people to spot a hazmat spill, this is one of the most important training levels, even though it requires the least amount of class time. The next level of training, first responder operations, is for workers who keep hazmat spills from spreading and make sure that unauthorized people stay away from the incident area. To be classified as an operations level first responder, you would take a course of at least 8 class hours. In an OSHA-approved operations course, you learn hazardous materials terms, essential risk assessment techniques, how to use personal protective equipment, PPE, basic control and containment procedures for spills, and basic decontamination methods.
Although they don't actually remove spilled materials, operations level first responders do prevent these chemicals from harming anyone. Because of this, the role they play in the cleanup process is invaluable.
Next is the hazardous materials technician level. If you are a hazmat tech, you must know how to plug up the source of the leak if necessary, soak up the spilled material with appropriate sorbents, and then remove the contaminated sorbents, sealing them in a specialized container for disposal. OSHA-approved hazardous materials technician training requires a minimum of 24 hours. In this course, you learn about chemical and toxicological hazards, as well as risk assessment techniques. After becoming a certified hazmat tech, you are able to identify materials with monitoring equipment, use advanced spill control techniques, and implement complex decontamination procedures. Hazardous materials technicians are aided by workers who have gone through the next level of training, hazardous materials specialists. Hazmat specialists are experts who know how to handle all of the hazardous substances in your facility. They also act as liaisons with federal, state, local, or other governmental authorities during hazmat emergencies. Like hazmat technicians, hazardous materials specialists take a minimum of 24 hours of OSHA-approved classes that focus on chemical, radiological, and toxicological hazards, and how to select PPE for unusual situations. Hazmat specialists are also taught how to perform specialized containment operations. They also determine what type of decontamination procedures should be used in complex situations when many different chemicals are present. The person having the most responsibility and authority in a hazmat emergency is the incident commander. These are the individuals who are in charge of all cleanup operations. Incident commander training varies with the needs of individual facilities. In all cases, however, OSHA requires a minimum of at least 24 class hours of training equal to the first responder operations level. An incident commander must also have detailed knowledge of applicable state and local regulations, know how to implement your facility's emergency response plan, be an expert on decontamination procedures, and understand the medical risks, such as heat stroke, faced by employees who work in chemical protective clothing.
While the incident commander is the highest level of authority during an emergency, people at every training level are critical to the spill cleanup process. The system cannot work unless employees at all levels pull together, from awareness level first responders on up. Now that we've seen the various levels of hazmat spill cleanup training, let's look at how a typical small hazardous materials incident should be handled. Not like this. Yuck. Oh.
While no two hazmat spills are alike, the cleanup process is similar for all of them. In the majority of cases, the first person to report a spill is an awareness level responder. The incident commander then takes over the cleanup operation, ensuring that the following actions are taken. As soon as possible, an operations level first responder evacuates the area, then cordons off the incident site with warning signs or caution tape. If the spill has occurred indoors, the responder must also seal off air ducts leading from the contaminated area to other parts of the building, and open windows and doors to the outside, allowing vapors to dissipate. Next, the responder places barriers or absorbents around the spill, preventing it from spreading. This technique is called diking. Common diking materials include absorbent socks made of polypropylene and flexible barriers of urethane or PVC. While both types of dikes have the same objectives, they function in different ways. Absorbent socks contain a spill by both blocking and partially absorbing it. Socks cannot be decontaminated, however, and they are considered hazardous waste after one use. Federal law mandates that contaminated spill socks must be disposed of according to OSHA guidelines. Flexible barriers, on the other hand, only block spills from spreading. They do not absorb any of the spilled materials. Because of this, flexible barriers can be decontaminated and reused. While you see them being piled up to prevent flooding on TV, sandbags should never be used to dike any type of hazmat spill. They are not made to absorb hazardous substances. Spilled chemicals can leak through sandbags, allowing contamination to spread, and in some cases, the sand itself could actually react with the spilled liquids. No matter which method is used, diking must keep the spill from running into storm drains or sewers and contaminating the environment. This is such a serious problem that you must contact your supervisor immediately if you ever spot chemicals leaking into a drain. Once the diking has been completed, the operations level responder is allowed to leave the scene and go to the decontamination area. A hazardous materials technician then takes over. Aided by information from a hazardous materials specialist, the hazardous materials technician first characterizes the spill site, identifying the chemicals involved in the spill and determining the hazards that these materials present. This is done with direct reading instruments that provide instant information on environmental conditions. Examples of direct reading instruments include combustible gas monitors used to detect airborne contaminants that could be a fire hazard, detector tubes made of disposable glass containing materials that change color in the presence of certain chemicals, and field survey meters used to detect radiation.
In addition to characterizing the site, hazardous materials technicians must also look for hazards such as open pits and other unsafe areas. These must be reported to management as soon as possible.
After characterizing the site, the hazardous materials technician radios a report on site conditions to the incident commander. The commander will then consult the hazardous materials specialist to determine if the situation requires special handling. In most cases, the technician's next step is to spread an absorbent compound over the spill to soak up the hazardous material. These compounds are often called sorbents. They are frequently in a granular form and look a lot like cat litter. Sorbents are chemically inert, so they don't react with the substances they absorb. After a layer of sorbents has been spread over the spill blankets are then placed on top of the absorbent compound. These absorb the materials that the sorbents leave behind. Spill blankets are disposable and are also made of chemically inert materials. They come in various sizes, which can be cut to fit specific spills. The blankets are also available in rolls or individual pre-cut sheets. Once the spill has been absorbed, the sorbent and the spill blankets can be shoveled into an OSHA-approved container for disposal. Normally, this is routine, but there are two situations when hazmat technicians should be especially careful. If, as a hazmat tech, you were cleaning up a flammable chemical, you would need to use non-sparking tools, such as plastic shovels, to transfer the material to the disposal container. You would need to be especially cautious around electrical equipment as well, because most liquids conduct electricity, and you could receive a fatal shock if the spilled material came into contact with a power source. Sparks can also ignite flammable or combustible chemicals. Before beginning cleanup, you would also confirm that all nearby equipment was switched off at the main breaker, so the machinery's power switch would be less likely to produce a spark when it is turned off. The breaker box would also need to be locked and tagged out. Once the contaminated material is sealed in its container, it is removed to an EPA-approved hazmat treatment facility. Here, the material will be recycled into useful substances or converted into a non-hazardous form and sent to a landfill. After the spill has been cleaned up, everyone who was involved must undergo decontamination. This usually takes place in a Contamination Reduction Corridor, CRC. The CRC is a series of 2 to 4 stations where workers can have their PPE and tools cleaned. Workers passing through the CRC are thoroughly washed with decontamination solution, which normally consists of detergent and water. The only exception to this occurs when you are dealing with water-reactive contaminants. In these cases, a specialized decontamination mixture must be used. The decontamination solution is then rinsed off, typically in a low tub, such as a child's wading pool. Following a rinse-off, CRC technicians take PPE and tools from the decontaminated workers, who then report directly to an area where they can shower.
Once decontamination is complete, the decontamination solutions must be disposed of according to OSHA guidelines. And that is hazmat spill cleanup in a nutshell. Let's review.
Knowing what to do during a hazmat spill requires preparation. So be sure to participate in your company's hazard communication program. Familiarize yourself with your facility's emergency response plan and know who to notify when a spill occurs. Finally, no matter what your level of spill cleanup training, follow your facility's guidelines to the letter.
Spills of hazardous chemicals will occur, but by knowing what hazardous materials you work with and how to safely clean up spills, you can do your part in keeping your coworkers and yourself safe.